The aroma of freshly brewed cinnamon spice coffee often brings me comfort, but on that bleak October afternoon, it only emphasized the cold void in my kitchen. I, Beatrice Harding, was 74, a woman navigating the treacherous, silent waters of widowhood after losing my beloved Theodore 10 months prior. We had built a life as solid and comforting as the Vermont stone cottage we shared, 49 years of predictable, quiet bliss. Now, only the predictable quiet remained. I was watering the geraniums on the sill, Theodore's favorite, when my phone buzzed. It was Stella, my only daughter, the person I thought held my heart in her hands. "Mom, listen closely." Stella's voice cut through the line, sharp and strangely devoid of emotion. It was a tone I had never heard before, metallic and cold, like a freshly drawn scalpel. "Marco and I are finalizing our move to Costa Rica tomorrow. The big opportunity, you know. We needed capital immediately." I felt an invisible hand squeeze the breath from my chest. "What are you talking about, darling?" "I took care of things," she continued, speaking over me, rushing her words as if reading a prepared statement. "I sold the lake cabin and your little teal hatchback. The transfer for your portion of the assets will be processed tonight. We needed the majority of the liquidity for the investment. Goodbye, Mom." A sharp, audible click ended the call. I stood there, the copper watering can slipping from my numb fingers to clatter against the pine floor. 32 years of my life, every sacrifice, every late night spent worrying, every piece of unconditional love poured into her existence, and in less than 30 seconds, she had liquidated my memories and dismissed me like an unnecessary invoice. The lake cabin. Theodore and I had spent our engagement remodeling it, scraping paint from every window frame, naming it the Anchor. It wasn't just wood and glass. It was the physical repository of our youth and joy. And the little teal car, my practical Japanese model. Theodore, a retired engineer, had maintained it religiously, treating it like a precious machine. It was the last large object he had touched with care. The faint smell of his pipe tobacco still lingering in the upholstery. A wave of crushing despair threatened to pull me under. The same wave that had haunted me since Theodore's sudden stroke. But then an odd calm settled. I lowered myself onto the nearest kitchen chair, took a deep, shaky breath, and smiled. It was a small, private smile of fierce remembrance. Stella and her opportunistic husband Marco had clearly seen me as a feeble, grieving woman, a soft target. They had been so present since the funeral, urging me to organize the estate, to simplify my assets. I now saw their visits not as comfort, but as reconnaissance for their calculated betrayal. What they didn't know was the secret my brilliant, quiet Theodore had left me. Just a week before his passing, as we were having our usual evening tea on the porch, Theodore had pressed a thick, wax-sealed ledger into my hand. "B," he'd whispered, his eyes distant, fixed on the distant mountain peaks he loved. "Put this in the fireproof safe. Don't open it until the funeral is long past, until you feel the strength return to your spirit." I had followed his instructions, tucking the heavy book into the safe behind my antique china cabinet, and in the consuming chaos of grief, I had utterly forgotten its existence. But now, the memory was a beacon. They thought they had left me with a small bank deposit and a handful of pity. They had no idea that Theodore, my history professor and collector of rare books, was also a man who had spent his quiet retirement building a secret empire. A silent protector who had prepared for the worst. I changed immediately, pulling on my most comfortable wool suit, the one Theodore had loved, and hailed an old-fashioned yellow cab, no car, according to Stella, and headed to the bank. The world outside rushed by, but I felt oddly detached, focused only on the task ahead. The bank manager, a polite young man named Mr. Chen, led me to the vault. I retrieved the heavy leather-bound ledger. It wasn't just a book. It was a physical manifestation of Theodore's secret life. Back home, with the afternoon light slanting through the window, I opened the ledger. It wasn't full of philosophical notes, but precise, detailed financial records. It contained legal documents, investment portfolios, and deeds to properties I had never heard of. There was also a final letter tucked into the front cover, written in Theodore's elegant looping hand. "My dearest B," the letter began, causing the familiar tears to sting my eyes. "If you read this, I am already looking down on you from a comfortable cloud. Forgive me for the secret. I wanted you to live free of financial anxieties, which is why I invested our savings quietly through the years. We are not just modest. We are significantly comfortable." My breath hitched as I turned the page. We don't just own the anchor. We possess 5 other commercial properties, including a boutique hotel in the White Mountains and, this will make you smile, the entire downtown loft building where Stella and Marco have their apartment. I gripped the ledger, my hands shaking. Theodore, my mild-mannered man of letters, had been the silent landlord to my daughter. He had channeled all his assets through a holding company he brilliantly named the Beatrice Trust. And I, according to the final entry, was the sole owner and director. Theodore's writing continued. "You know our Stella. If she knew the full extent of our wealth, her affection might become transactional. I needed her love to be genuine, not conditional." The sheer, bitter irony was a punch to the gut. Stella had seen me as poor and disposable, and she had abandoned me. But her betrayal had been for nothing. I held the keys to her entire future. I knew my next move. I immediately called Mr. Davies, the lawyer who had handled Theodore's simple will. He was surprised to hear from me, extending condolences again. "Mr. Davies, I need an urgent meeting. I've found a ledger of Theodore's, and I need you to confirm its contents. I'll clear my calendar, Mrs. Harding, tomorrow morning." That night, the house was still, but my mind raced. Theodore's final act of protection had given me a weapon. I would use it. I dreamt of Theodore, looking up from his favorite armchair. "It's about time, Ellie," he said in the dream. "It's about time you stopped being the victim." I woke with an unshakable resolve. I had a plan. The next morning, I wore my favorite burgundy jacket and applied my strongest lipstick. I looked in the mirror and saw the woman Theodore had loved, strong, resilient, and ready for battle. Mr. Davies's office was sleek and modern. When I presented the ledger, his professional composure fractured. "Mrs. Harding, Theodore was a financial genius. This is a formidable estate. I know, Mr. Davies. Now, I need to know the legal ramifications. Is this ledger valid?" He confirmed everything. The trust was legally sound, and I was the owner of all properties. He also verified my suspicion. Stella's sale of the anchor was illegal. "We can immediately file a claim for fraud, Mrs. Harding, and pursue criminal charges against your daughter." "No." "Mr. Davies, no legal action. This must be handled with absolute discretion and secrecy." "You are my client," he conceded, his eyes full of curiosity. "What do you require?" "I need you to discreetly nullify the fraudulent sale of the lake cabin. The buyers were clearly misled, and I need you to grant me unassailable control over all assets, specifically the Beatrice Trust, which owns the loft building where Stella and Marco currently live. Feasible. But the administrative process will take approximately 3 weeks to ensure the legal groundwork is ironclad." "Perfect. And Mr. Davies, I reiterate, not a soul, especially Stella, is to know I am behind this." "Not yet?" I walked out of his office, feeling the weight of my double life settle upon my shoulders. By day, I was the grieving, easily discarded widow. By night, I was the silent orchestrator of a quiet, inevitable retribution. The next few weeks passed in a strange blur. I maintained my vulnerable facade for my neighbors. My lifelong friend, Gloria, visited often, offering pity and casseroles. "Beatrice, darling, is it true that Stella just left off to Costa Rica?" Gloria asked, frowning. "Yes, Gloria. Marco had a big investment opportunity there. And how will you manage? We all know Theodore's pension was small. If you only knew," I thought, smiling gently. "I'll be fine, Gloria." Theodore made a few quiet investments. Gloria's look was one of disbelief, mixed with pity for my presumed naivete. "Well, you call me if you need anything." I welcomed the pity. It was my armor. Mr. Davies called 3 weeks later. "Mrs. Harding, good news. The sale of the Anchor is nullified. The cabin is legally yours again. We're finalizing the trust paperwork now. Another week for full control of the loft building." I hung up, a surge of power running through me. Stella had been gone for 4 weeks. Not one phone call, not one postcard. She had erased me, but that was about to change. I drove Theodore's newly reclaimed teal hatchback. Mr. Davies had retrieved it after proving the power of attorney was obtained under duress, to the lake cabin. It stood empty and silent. I sat on the porch, remembering moments of pure, unfiltered family happiness, moments Stella had reduced to a commodity. The caretaker, an older gentleman, approached me. He mentioned that the buyers were told the elderly widow was too ill to manage the property and needed a quick sale. Stella had not only stolen my property, she had used my supposed sickness and vulnerability to lie to strangers. She had painted me as a burden to justify her greed. That revelation solidified my resolve. The lesson had to be total. I called Mr. Davies that evening. "Mr. Davies, the final paperwork for the Beatrice Trust is done, correct?" "It will be finished tomorrow morning, Mrs. Harding. You will have undeniable control of the loft building by noon." "Excellent. I need you to prepare a letter from my daughter." "An eviction notice." Mr. Davies went silent. "Mrs. Harding, are you completely sure?" "She is your only daughter. Completely. She deemed me worthless and disposable. She will now learn the true cost of that decision." "Do you want it sent to Costa Rica?" "No. I want it delivered to her apartment the minute she returns. I have a very strong feeling she'll be home soon." I was right. Gloria rushed over 2 days later, her face pale with neighborhood gossip. "Beatrice, you won't believe it. Marco is in terrible trouble with the Federal Reserve Bank. The loans he took out on the loft, it turns out the building isn't his. And apparently, Stella had no idea about the depth of his debts. He lied about the entire Costa Rica venture. It was just a run-for-it escape. Perfect. Marco was a rat, and Stella had sacrificed her mother for him. Now she would reap the whirlwind. That night, I looked at the dark peaks of the mountains. "Thank you, Theodore. You saw this coming." The next morning, Mr. Davies called. "Mrs. Harding, Stella has landed. She's at the airport, alone. Marco stayed behind." "And the letter?" "It will be delivered to her apartment this afternoon. She should receive it tonight." I hung up, a blend of anxiety and steely resolve coursing through me. The first domino was about to fall. Stella was about to discover that her mother was no longer the soft, defenseless victim she had so easily abandoned. My neighbor, Gloria, who seemed to have an informant network that spanned half of Vermont, rushed over 2 days later. She found me on the porch sipping tea, wearing my best imitation of a grieving, fragile widow. "Beatrice, you won't believe the news from the city," Gloria whispered, leaning conspiratorially over the porch railing. "Stella's back, but she arrived alone." "And she looks like a ghost!" The doorman at the loft building told my nephew she was nearly frantic when she couldn't get her key to work. She had to beg the superintendent to let her into her own apartment with the emergency copy. I nodded, maintaining a gentle, worried frown. "Oh dear, Marco must have the keys. That's not the half of it, honey. The rumors are flying. Marco didn't just leave her. He took the remaining investment capital and all her jewelry, and he married that surf instructor immediately after landing. And the Costa Rica investment? It was a massive lie. He just wanted to flee the banks? Gloria's eyes, usually sharp with judgment, were now filled with pity for Stella. She looks completely broken, Beatrice. I saw her luggage, just one small dented suitcase. It's like her life imploded. Imploded. That was the perfect word. Marco had done exactly what I expected. He'd run off like a cornered rat, leaving Stella to face the consequences of their shared betrayal, alone. She had traded a lifetime of unconditional love for a selfish lie, and now she had nothing. Poor Stella, I murmured, a tremor in my voice that I didn't have to fake completely. The mother in me ached to pull her close, but the woman betrayed held firm. The lesson must be learned. Mr. Davies called later that afternoon. Mrs. Harding, the eviction notice was delivered to Miss Stella Harding 1 hour ago. The doorman confirmed she signed for it personally. And the terms? 30 days to vacate the premises per standard legal procedure. It's impossible to contest as the legal owner. The Beatrice Trust, now solely controlled by you, is within its rights to reclaim the property. Mr. Davies, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Are you certain you considered the family implications? He paused. Mrs. Harding, I believe you have considered them more deeply than anyone else. I just wanted to confirm that you are resolute in this decision. I am resolute, Mr. Davies. She treated me like garbage. She will now understand that such actions have a true cost. That night, sleep was elusive. I lay awake, imagining the scene in her luxury loft. The initial confusion, the frantic search for a mistake, the desperate calls to a missing Marco, and finally, the cold realization that the eviction was real, undeniable, and impossible to fight. She would realize the depth of the deception Marco had pulled, but she would still be searching for the real enemy. The phone rang at precisely 8:30 a.m. the next day. I knew it was her. I let it ring twice before answering, adjusting my tone to convey gentle, slightly confused concern. Mom, you have to help me. I need to talk to you right now. Her voice was raw, frayed at the edges. Good morning, darling. How was your flight from Costa Rica? Mom, I don't have time for pleasantries. I received this insane letter last night. It says I have to be out of the loft in 30 days. It's a mistake, isn't it? Tell me you know something about this. An eviction notice? How utterly strange. From whom? I asked, feigning total ignorance. From some holding company. The Theodore Property Group, she stammered. Theodore's name, simple and direct. Do you know this company, Mom? No, honey. Theodore never spoke to me about property groups. Are you sure it's legitimate? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Mom, I need your help. Marco abandoned me. He took everything. And now this. I don't understand what's happening. The confirmation was agonizingly clear. Her savior had become her betrayer. She had lost everything for a man who didn't hesitate to toss her aside when his funds ran dry. Oh, Stella, I am so sorry. Where are you right now? I'm here, at the loft, but I don't know for how long. Mom, can I come home? I need to talk to someone. I have absolutely nowhere else to go. The irony was exquisitely painful. The one she had tossed aside was now her final port of call. Of course, darling. This house will always be your home. Come over whenever you're ready. I'm on my way. I hung up and went to the mirror. I needed to be perfect for this performance. I put on my most conservative pale blue dress, tied my hair in a simple, slightly disheveled knot, and perfected my expression. Worried, frail, but fundamentally forgiving. When Stella arrived, she would see exactly what she expected. The vulnerable mother she believed she could still manipulate, the only lifeline she had left. Stella arrived an hour later. When I opened the door, the sight of her was genuinely shocking. She had lost significant weight. Her once flawless makeup was gone, replaced by deep purple circles under her eyes. Her designer clothes were wrinkled. She looked utterly defeated. "Mom," she said, stumbling slightly on the step. She started to reach for me, then stopped, clearly remembering the coldness of her last phone call. "Come in, honey. Let me make you some tea." We sat in the kitchen at the same pine table where Theodore had quietly read his newspaper for decades. Stella looked small and utterly lost. "Mom, I am so sorry for how I left," she whispered, her voice tight with grief. "I know I treated you terribly." "It's in the past, Stella." "No, it's not. I treated you like an inconvenience, and now I am truly alone." Her voice broke into a sob. "What happened with Marco?" "He left with a 22-year-old yoga instructor in Punta Arenas. There was never any legitimate business. It was a complete lie. He just needed the money from selling the cabin and the car to fund his escape from the mountain of debt he had here." "All that debt?" "Yes, Mom. He took out loans using the loft as collateral, not knowing he didn't even own it. The banks are coming after me now for his debts because we were married, and on top of that, this eviction notice. I have no money, no job, nowhere to live." The tears came freely now, genuine tears of desperation and fear. For a brief, dangerous moment, my mother's instinct took over. I wanted to hug her, tell her everything was fine, and that her father had taken care of us. But then I remembered the cold, dismissive click of the phone. The lie about my illness. The calculation, not yet. The lesson is not complete. "Did you talk to a lawyer about this eviction letter?" "I can't afford a lawyer, Mom. We spent every penny." "Marco took what little cash was left when he ran off. So what are your plans?" "I was thinking, maybe I could stay here with you for a while, just until I find a job and can afford a small room somewhere." The question I had orchestrated. After kicking me out of my own house and treating me like a disposable relic, she now expected the frail, poor widow she had created to save her. "Of course, honey," I said, my voice softening just enough. "This will always be your home." Stella's face registered genuine shock. "Really, Mom? After everything? You are my daughter, Stella. That will never change." She rose and embraced me, a desperate, clinging hug from someone drowning. I returned the hug, but my arms were wrapped around her with calculation and strategy. "Thank you, Mom. I promise I'll find work immediately. I won't be a burden. Don't worry about that now. Just rest." Stella left that afternoon to retrieve her remaining possessions from the loft. I stayed in the kitchen, observing the silence. She had walked straight into my trap, broken and unsuspecting. This was phase 2. Having her live here would give me the perfect opportunity for the next stage. I would let her find her feet, feel safe, and believe she had manipulated her way back to security. And then, when she was most comfortable, I would administer the final, necessary shock. I called Mr. Davies that night. "Mr. Davies, I need you to focus entirely on Marco's debt. I want a complete, itemized breakdown of every dollar he owes, to whom, and what legal connection Stella has to those liabilities. That will take time and resources." "Mrs. Harding, time and resources are what we have. And absolute secrecy, Mr. Davies. No one is to know I'm investigating this. May I ask your ultimate goal, Mrs. Harding?" "My ultimate goal, Mr. Davies, is very simple. I am going to save my daughter. But first, she has to truly understand what it means to lose everything." I hung up, poured myself a glass of Theodore's favorite Chardonnay, and looked out at the dark sky. The game was far from over, but for the first time in 10 months, I felt completely in control. Stella moved back into her childhood bedroom the next day. She arrived with only her dented suitcase and a small cardboard box, a stark contrast to the life she'd led in the luxury loft. I watched her unpack in the tiny space, the humiliation etched into the lines around her eyes. She had traded her gilded cage for a refuge she'd previously dismissed as quaint and cluttered. "Mom," she said that afternoon, her voice softer now, almost fragile. "I found this among the things Marco left behind." She held up a smaller, sealed envelope. It was tucked deep inside his desk drawer. "It has your name on it." My heart gave a heavy thump. Another of Theodore's careful provisions. This one was plain white, bearing only my name in his neat script. Stella, however, looked at it with a flicker of hopeful greed. "Maybe Marco found it after Dad died and forgot to give it to me," she suggested, the old transactional edge briefly returning. "Can I see it?" I took the envelope, keeping my expression neutral, betraying none of the sudden anxiety I felt. Inside was a crisp folded piece of paper and a small antique-looking brass key. Theodore's note was brief. "My dearest B, if you are reading this after receiving the main ledger, it confirms our daughter is facing genuine hardship. This key belongs to a safety deposit box at the Riverfront Trust branch downtown, Box 777. There is something inside that can provide immediate assistance, but you must use this resource with wisdom and foresight. With eternal love, Theodore." Stella read the note over my shoulder, her eyes wide. A safe deposit box? Dad had a secret deposit box? I had no idea. "Neither did I lied smoothly, tucking the key into my apron pocket. "Theodore was a very private man about his finances. But, Mom, we have to go. Maybe there are documents or cash, something valuable that can help me fight this eviction." The desperation was palpable now. She was grasping at straws, looking for the quick, easy solution she believed existed. I let her plead for a calculated minute, watching her anxiety peak. "I don't know, honey. Maybe we should leave his secrets alone." "Mom, please! We have nothing left. This might be the only way I can afford a lawyer." "Very well," I conceded, with a sigh of reluctant motherly duty. "We can go tomorrow, but we must keep our expectations low." That evening, Stella insisted on cooking. She made a simple chicken stew, trying earnestly to contribute, but the flavor was weak, seasoned more with guilt and fear than with salt. She recounted more details of the collapse of her life in Punta Arenas. "He lied about everything, Mom. Not just the investments. The debt is astronomical. He owes over $200,000 to various lenders. And he used my name on some of those loans without my knowledge. He forged my signature on documents I gave him to manage our joint accounts." "Do you have proof of the forgery?" "I don't know. The banks just keep repeating that because we were married. I'm liable for all the debt anyway." "And the divorce?" "Marco's phone is disconnected. He's vanished. I can't even serve him papers." "Poor Stella," I said softly, the genuine sympathy warring with my strategic resolve. Theodore had seen this coming. Marco, the opportunist, had done me a favor by fleeing. Stella was experiencing the profound, gut-wrenching pain of betrayal and abandonment, the exact feeling she had inflicted upon me. "I thought Marco loved me," she wept into her napkin. "I thought we were building something, but I was just a convenient tool. A signature on a contract, a source of quick cash. How could I have been so blind?" It was tempting to tell her I had tried to warn her about Marco's slick charm, but that would shatter my facade. "Love can be misleading, honey. Don't punish yourself, but I didn't just ruin my life, Mom. I ruined yours. I took your cabin, your car, everything Dad left you to give to that man. Now we're just two poor women trying to survive because of my greed. If she only knew. I was the silent owner of her entire former world. But she had to believe we were both impoverished. She had to believe she was the cause of our shared ruin." The next day, we took the bus downtown. Stella was a whirlwind of nerves and false hope. At the Riverfront Trust, the employee led us to the vault. I presented the brass key, and the heavy door to box 777 swung open. Inside, resting on velvet, was a dazzling array of antique jewelry, pearl necklaces, sapphire earrings, and several intricate gold pieces I recognized as Theodore's family heirlooms. There was a second letter detailing the origin and approximate value of each item. Stella gasped, her breath catching in her throat. "Mom, this is incredible. This must be worth a fortune." Theodore's letter estimated the collection's value at approximately $300,000. A substantial amount? Certainly enough to pay off a good chunk of debt, but a mere fraction of the assets in the Beatrice Trust. "What do we do with this, Mom?" "They're memories, darling. Family history. But, Mom, we could sell some of it. With this money, you could buy back the Anchor, the lake cabin, and I could pay off the most urgent of Marco's debts. The ones the banks are threatening me over." There it was, the inevitable transactional leap. Her first thought was still liquidation to solve the problems Marco had created. She hadn't learned the full lesson yet. "Are you certain you want to liquidate your father's heirlooms to pay off the debts of the man who betrayed you?" "What other option do I have, Mom? If I don't pay soon, the banks will seize everything. I have no income, no credit, and legal claims hanging over me. No one will hire me." I watched the desperation in her eyes. I knew she was right about the job prospects. She was trapped in the consequences of her choices. "Think carefully, honey. Once these are sold, they are gone forever." "I know, but I can't risk losing this house too, if the banks manage to prove I have some kind of legal connection to your property." We returned home with the jewelry. Stella spread it out on the kitchen table, meticulously dividing it into sell and keep piles. It was heartbreaking to watch her assign a cash value to decades of family history. "I can get close to $280,000 for the collection," she calculated, using a worn notepad. "It's less than Theodore's appraisal, but jewelers know I'm desperate. It's enough to clear the major collateralized loans." "And how will you decide which debts take priority?" I talked to a pro bono financial counselor. She told me to prioritize the collateralized debt, the one tied to property or with the threat of immediate seizure. Stella had matured quickly under pressure. The pampered daughter was gone, replaced by a woman fighting for survival, calculating risks. The suffering was making her responsible, but she was still fragile. That night, as Stella organized her debt folders, Mr. Davies called. "Mrs. Harding, I have the final detailed report on Marco's debt. The situation is much more severe. He owes over $350,000 to multiple institutions. And the legal liability for Stella? He did use her forged signature on multiple high-value instruments. If we can prove fraud and coercion, we can absolutely clear her name. But it will be a high-stakes, expensive legal battle. Easily $80,000 in legal fees alone. With no guarantee of success, Mr. Davies, I want you to prepare all the necessary legal documents to clear Stella from this debt. But tell her nothing yet. You intend to pay the legal fees, Mrs. Harding?" "I intend to do whatever is necessary to protect my daughter, but I will manage this on my own terms. The resolution must be complete and undeniable before she knows." I hung up, finding Stella in the living room, staring at Theodore's wedding band, which she had placed in the keep pile. She looked utterly drained. "What are you thinking about, honey?" "About Dad," she murmured, her eyes red. How disappointed he would be. He taught me about honor and valuing what's real, and I did the opposite. I sold off our memories for cash. I ruined everything he built. For the first time, her regret wasn't centered on her loss, but on her actions. It was a moral reckoning. People make mistakes, Stella. The important thing is what you learn. But how do I learn, Mom? How do I fix the damage I've done? The final step was approaching. She was ready to face the truth, but she needed one final, humbling experience before I revealed the hand of the Beatrice Trust. The final days leading up to Stella's necessary act of financial liquidation were agonizing. I watched her make the rounds to jewelers and antique dealers, meticulously comparing offers for Theodore's precious heirlooms. She kept only the wedding band and the smallest of the pearl earrings, insisting the rest had to go. "Mom, I received $280,000 for the collection," she announced one afternoon, carefully stacking thick bundles of cash on the kitchen table. The sight of the money felt profoundly sad. It was the cash equivalent of decades of memories. "It's exactly enough to pay off the two most urgent collateralized debts Marco used the loft as security for. It will stop the immediate seizure threat." "Are you absolutely certain you want to use your only remaining resource this way?" I asked, putting on my best worried expression. "I have no choice," she replied, her voice empty but firm. "If I don't stop the foreclosure proceedings, I'll be legally ruined forever. This gives me a clean slate for the biggest, most aggressive creditors, and maybe buys me time to tackle the rest." The irony was now a constant, sharp ache. My daughter was sacrificing her father's secret treasure to pay the debts of the man who betrayed her, all while believing she was saving my house from legal entanglements. Later that week, she secured a part-time night job cleaning offices in the downtown financial district. It was an insultingly low wage for a woman with her education, but it was honest work and an act of sheer will. "I start Monday," she told me, her eyes heavy with fatigue, but tinged with a flicker of defiance. "I can clean from 6 p.m. to midnight. It leaves my days open to look for something better and deal with the remaining debt paperwork." "That's going to be exhausting, Stella. Are you sure you can handle that kind of physical labor?" I asked, my mother's heart tightening. "I'll have to learn, Mom," she said, pulling on a faded sweatshirt. "I can't be a burden to you anymore. I need to know I can support myself, even at rock bottom." Seeing my daughter, who had only ever managed luxury properties and lavish event planning, prepare for minimum wage custodial work was painful. But it was the final necessary ingredient for the lesson. That weekend, Mr. Davies called with the news I had been waiting for. "Mrs. Harding, we've located Marco in Costa Rica. He's facing local fraud charges there due to a scheme involving the surf school. More importantly, we now have undeniable, documented proof that he deliberately forged Miss Stella's signature on over a dozen high-value loan documents before fleeing the country. And what does that mean legally? It means we can prove fraud and criminal coercion. Miss Stella can be legally extricated from virtually all of Marco's debt, particularly the unsecured loans, without paying a single dollar. She is legally a victim, not a co-conspirator." "Excellent, Mr. Davies. Begin the legal separation immediately. I want the injunctions filed and the proof submitted to every creditor. But as we agreed, absolute secrecy. Understood. Mrs. Harding. This process will take about 4 weeks to finalize through the courts." When I hung up, Stella was in the kitchen, meticulously dividing her small earnings budget for the upcoming week. "Who was that, Mom?" "Just the gardener calling to confirm the delivery of the new lilacs," I lied easily. My double life was now second nature. The next 2 weeks were a strange equilibrium of pain and pride. By day, I was the frail, worried mother, watching Stella send out resumes and talk grimly to collection agents. By night, I listened as she returned from her cleaning job, exhausted but strangely dignified. "Mom, I met a wonderful woman tonight. Mrs. Petrova," she told me one evening, rubbing her sore lower back. "She's been cleaning for 20 years. Her husband left her years ago with 2 kids. She told me that cleaning offices wasn't her dream, but it was her dignity. It gave her independence. She sounds wise. She is. She told me something I can't forget. She said there are 2 types of people who end up in this job, those who were born with nothing and those who had everything and threw it away. She asked me which one I was. And your answer? I told her I was the one who threw it all away. I admitted I had all the opportunities in the world, and I ruined them by choosing the wrong man. She just smiled and said, "Well, honey, Then at least you know the price of a mistake. That puts you ahead of most people. My heart swelled with a complex mix of sorrow and triumph. She wasn't just working. She was learning the value of her own effort and finding solidarity in shared hardship. A week later, Gloria came by, bubbling with neighborhood chatter. "Beatrice, you won't believe the transformation in Stella. She's so humble now. She actually thanked me for the leftover apple crisp I brought over last night. She's nothing like the girl who left. Life is a great teacher, Gloria. Yes, but she needs to value you, Beatrice. Not just as the soft mother who rescues her, but as the strong woman who built this life. She needs to respect you, not just need you." Gloria's words resonated deeply. She had articulated the core of my plan. I didn't want a dependent daughter back. I wanted a partner in love and respect. The following morning, Mr. Davies called. "Mrs. Harding, the court filings are complete. We have successfully separated Miss Stella from nearly all of Marco's debt. The injunctions are served, and the banks are withdrawing their claims. She is legally free. The moment had arrived. After weeks of watching her struggle, work, and reflect, the lesson was fully absorbed. It was time to show her that she had never been truly alone. Mr. Davies, organize a meeting for this Friday morning. I want Stella there, and I want the full ledger, the deeds, and the legal documentation ready to be presented. It's time for her to know the complete truth." I told Stella I had arranged a meeting with a high-profile pro bono lawyer who might be able to help her with her debt situation, omitting any mention of the cost. She was nervous but hopeful, seeing this as her only viable path forward. "Mom, I don't have money to pay anyone," she worried on the way to the city. "I'll have to pay him in installments if he even agrees. Don't worry, honey. Just listen to what he has to say." We arrived at Mr. Davies's opulent office. Stella was visibly shaking, wearing her best, slightly ill-fitting suit. "Mrs. Harding, Miss Brooks, thank you for coming, Mr. Davies said warmly. "Thank you for seeing me," Stella replied, wringing her hands. "I must warn you, Mr. Davies, I am in serious financial trouble. My life is essentially ruined." "That's exactly why we're here," he said, meeting my gaze. "But first, Miss Brooks, please look at these." He handed her the folder containing the legal separation documents and the fraud evidence. Stella's face went through a kaleidoscope of emotions as she read. I don't understand. These documents say Marco forged my signature, that there's proof of coercion, that I am not responsible for these debts." "That is correct. We successfully proved you were a victim of fraud." "But who paid for this investigation? Who fought the banks? I couldn't afford a single lawyer." Mr. Davies looked at me. It was the final, breathtaking moment. "Stella," I said, my voice steady, stripped of all its previous gentle frailty. "There is something I need to tell you. Your father left me more than you knew. Much more." "What do you mean, Mom?" "Mr. Davies, show her the ledger," he presented. The large, leather-bound book and the folder containing the deeds to the Beatrice Trust, the property certificates, and the bank statements. Theodore's entire secret empire. Stella read in stunned silence, her eyes jumping from the documents to me and back again. "Mom, this says you own the loft building." "Yes. And all these other properties, investments, you are rich." "Yes. This means, when I sold the anchor, it was your house and the sale was fraudulent. I recovered it weeks ago." She stared at the ledger, the realization settling like an unbearable weight. "How long? How long have you known this?" "Since the day you called me from the cafe, dismissing me." "You knew all this when I came back from Costa Rica begging for help?" "Yes. You knew you could solve all my problems when you saw me crying every night, worried about where I was going to live? Yes. The silence was deafening. Stella closed the ledger, her hands trembling, and looked directly into my eyes, seeing not the frail mother, but the powerful woman who had orchestrated her downfall and her salvation. "Why, Mom?" she asked, her voice a broken whisper. "Why did you let me suffer when you could have saved me instantly?" The silence in Mr. Davis's office was heavy, broken only by the faint hum of the air conditioning. Stella's question, "Why, Mom? Why did you let me suffer when you could have saved me instantly?" was not an accusation, but a plea for understanding, carrying the weight of weeks of pain and humiliation. I took a deep, steadying breath, letting my composure show the strength she needed to see now. This was the most important moment of my life as a mother. "Because you needed to learn something you couldn't learn any other way, Stella," I explained, my voice firm yet gentle. "What? What could possibly be worth this kind of cruelty?" she choked out, tears finally streaming down her face, not of self-pity, but of profound confusion and heartbreak. "You needed to learn the value of the things you discarded," I stated, keeping my gaze locked on hers. "The value of family, of respect, of responsibility. When you called me from the cafe, dismissing me, deciding I was an easily disposed of burden, it wasn't just the cabin and the car you stole. You tried to steal my dignity. You took the trust I had spent your entire life building." I watched her face as the words landed. She wasn't fighting back. She was processing a harsh, undeniable truth. "I abandoned you when you needed me most," she whispered, her head shaking slowly. "I treated you like garbage." "Yes," I confirmed. "And you expected the poor, broken woman you had created to rescue you immediately so you could return to your life without changing a thing. And you saved me anyway." "Yes," I said, a slight, sad smile touching my lips. "But not in the way you anticipated. I didn't save you by giving you money so you could keep making the same mistakes. I saved you by letting you hit rock bottom so you could discover the strength to save yourself." Mr. Davies discreetly intervened, sensing the emotional peak. "Miss Brooks, your mother has paid every legal expense to free you from Marco's fraud. The court orders were filed this morning, separating your liability completely. The loft building is currently being readied for new management, your mother's management. You are completely free of legal and financial problems caused by your ex-husband." Stella blinked, looking from Mr. Davies to the dense legal documents, then back to me. "And the cleaning job I got? The little money I earned?" "You can quit if you want," I said. "But I hope you won't." "Why?" "Because that job taught you something priceless that all the money in the Beatrice Trust couldn't buy. It taught you the dignity of honest work, the value of your own effort, the importance of appreciating every single dollar you earn. It taught you to be humble." The tears were drying now, replaced by a look of sober, absolute clarity, the look of a woman who had passed through a fire and emerged fundamentally changed. She saw not the frail mother, but the fierce protector who had engineered her crisis for her ultimate benefit. "Do you forgive me, Mom?" she asked, the question ringing with genuine sorrow. "I forgave you the moment I realized I had the power to protect you, darling. That was weeks ago. The real question is, can you forgive yourself?" "I don't know if I can. I did truly unforgivable things. People make mistakes, Stella. The important thing is what we do after we recognize them." Mr. Davies left the room, giving us a moment of necessary privacy. The silence returned, but this time it was not hostile. It was full of new potential. Stella finally broke it. Mom, I want you to know this. Even if that ledger was empty, even if you were really the poor widow I thought you were, I would have learned the same lesson. What lesson, honey? That there is nothing more valuable than unconditional love. These past few weeks, the only thing that kept me from crumbling was knowing I had a home with you. That no matter how badly I ruined my life, you were still my mother. That will never change, Stella. I know. But I also know I can never take that love for granted again. I have to earn it every day with respect, gratitude, and actions, not just words. We left Mr. Davies's office with a relationship reborn. We were no longer bound by mere obligation, but by a conscious, mature choice. We were two women who had survived the worst betrayal and were now moving forward as partners. The next few weeks were about rebuilding, but on Stella's terms. Despite knowing the scale of Theodore's fortune, she refused to abandon her night job. I need to finish what I started, Mom, she told me one evening, getting ready for work. I can't just jump back into a life of ease. That's what got me into trouble in the first place. You don't have to punish yourself forever. It's not punishment. It's a commitment. It's how I remember who I was and who I want to be now. I watched her put on her humble uniform, a far cry from the designer labels she used to wear. But there was a new dignity in her posture. She was finding strength in self-sufficiency. Gloria came to visit, still trying to piece together the neighborhood rumors. Beatrice, the talk is flying. People are saying you aren't poor at all. They saw Stella leaving Mr. Davies's office, and then she quietly settled all those debts at the bank. That takes real money, honey. People talk a lot, Gloria. Yes, but I know you. I want to know if my friend of 40 years was really lying to me about her circumstances. I poured her a cup of tea and sat down. It was time for my confidant to know the full truth. I showed her the empty spot where the ledger had been. Theodore left me more than anyone knew, Gloria. Much more. Enough so that Stella and I never have to worry about money again. Gloria's silence was absolute. And you pretended to be poor all these months. Because you needed Stella to learn this lesson? I recounted the full story, the calculated betrayal, my decision to let her face the consequences, and the final revelation. Beatrice, that is. Profoundly cold, and yet profoundly wise, Gloria finally said. Cold because you let your own daughter suffer, but wise because I understand why you did it. Stella needed to learn the true cost of what she had lost. If I had simply given her money, she would have learned that there is always someone there to rescue her from her own bad decisions. And do you think she learned it? Look for yourself. She has access to a fortune, yet she still chooses to work at night. She's using her meager earnings to quietly help the women she works with, buying groceries for a co-worker struggling with childcare costs. That is not the old Stella, Gloria smiled broadly. No, this Stella understands that dignity comes from work and respect, not from material possessions. That night, Stella returned from her shift. Mom, Mrs. Petrova asked me if I was really the daughter of the rich lady from the hill. And what did you tell her? I said yes. And she asked why I was still working. So I told her I need to prove to myself that I can stand on my own 2 feet. She laughed and said, Honey, that's the difference between being rich and acting rich. Your mother taught you how to be truly rich. Stella sat with me on the sofa. Mom, I've made another decision. I'm going to keep living here, but not as a dependent. I'm going to pay my share of the expenses. I want this relationship to be a partnership between 2 independent women who love and respect each other. And the social work studies? I want to use my new knowledge and our resources to help other women who are victims of financial abuse and abandonment. I want to turn my mistake into a mission. It was a perfect resolution. Stella had not only learned to value what she had, but she had found a constructive purpose rooted in her own pain. What about Marco? Mr. Davies told me he was sentenced to 2 years for fraud in Costa Rica. Honestly, Mom, I don't feel anything. No anger, no sadness. He did me the ultimate favor by betraying me. If he hadn't, I never would have hit rock bottom. And if I hadn't, I never would have learned the true value of love and self-respect. That night, I felt completely at peace. Theodore's plan, executed with calculated coldness and immense love, had worked. 6 months after that emotional reckoning in Mr. Davies's office, our life had settled into a rhythm that neither Stella nor I could have ever predicted. The house, once filled with the deep sorrow of my widowhood, now vibrated with a purposeful, quiet energy. Stella finished her prerequisite coursework for the Master's in Social Work program with near-perfect grades, often studying late into the night at the kitchen table where she once wept over her ruined life. She still held her job at the city outreach center, a position she secured after quitting the night cleaning gig and insisted on paying a fair share of the household expenses. Not because I needed the money, but because she needed the dignity of contribution. Our relationship had completely shifted. We were 2 independent women who shared a home and a mutual respect, no longer just a mother and a dependent daughter. One crisp April morning, Stella burst into the kitchen, waving an envelope. "Mom, it's here! The university acceptance letter." I put down my coffee cup, trying to contain my excitement. "And? I got in! Master's program starts next semester." Her face was radiant with genuine accomplishment. "And I want you to know I'm going to pay for the first year with my own savings." "Are you sure, honey? We can easily afford the full tuition now." "I know, but I need to do this, Mom. I need to prove that I can use my own effort to build this life. It's part of who I am now." She had learned to live simply, value her earnings, and most importantly, value her self-worth above material comfort. Meanwhile, I had channeled Theodore's considerable assets into establishing the Harding Legacy Foundation. Our primary mission was providing financial and legal support to women escaping situations of domestic abuse and financial abandonment. Women facing exactly the kind of fraud Stella had endured. Gloria, my longtime confidant, had become a regular fixture, visiting every Friday for tea. She watched our transformation with fascination and pride. "Beatrice, I have to confess something," Gloria said one Friday, pouring a second cup of tea. "At first I thought you were incredibly cruel to Stella, letting her flounder like that. It seemed unforgivable. And what do you think now?" "Now? Now I think you were the wisest, fiercest mother I've ever known. Look at your daughter. Really look at her." I didn't have to look far. The Stella in the living room, immersed in her study materials, was utterly changed. She possessed a serenity and confidence that sprang from genuine self-reliance. She wasn't relying on her inheritance. She was building her own legacy. "Did you know I saw Stella at the grocery store yesterday?" Gloria continued. "She wasn't buying for us. She was using her own money to buy essentials for a family she's helping through the outreach center. A woman whose husband drained their accounts and left her with nothing." When I asked why she didn't use the foundation's budget, she said that some things can't be measured in official budgets. She hadn't told me that. This Stella understands that money is a tool for good, not a shield for greed, Gloria concluded. You taught her how to be truly rich. That night, Stella and I had dinner on the porch, a quiet ritual we now cherished. It was a space for sharing thoughts, not just food. "Mom, I received a very strange letter today," Stella said, cutting her salad. I tensed immediately. "From Marco?" "Yes, from prison in Costa Rica. Apparently he was sentenced to 2 years for the fraud schemes down there. He wrote a long letter saying he regretted everything and asking for my forgiveness." "And how do you feel about it?" She paused, looking out toward the dimming mountain peaks. Honestly, I don't feel anything. No anger, no sadness, no desire for revenge. It's as if that part of my life happened decades ago. The Angela who married him no longer exists. I was deeply impressed by her emotional maturity. The wound had healed completely, leaving only a scar of experience. Are you going to write back? No, not because I hate him, but because there's nothing to say. I have no conversation with that man. My life is here now. Do you know what this entire experience taught me, Mom? She asked, looking at me with profound sincerity. Tell me. That true love isn't the one that tells you what you want to hear. Marco did that. He made me feel special, convinced me I deserved a life of luxury without effort. True love is the one that teaches you what you need to learn, even when it hurts. You taught me that genuine wealth comes from hard work, respect, and deep, honest relationships. The following day was Sunday. We had planned a trip to the lake cabin, the Anchor, for the first time since I had legally recovered it. Stella had delayed going, saying she needed emotional distance. Are you ready? I asked as we climbed into Theodore's teal hatchback. I think so. The drive was quiet. When we arrived, Stella stood by the car, looking at the familiar rustic cabin with wide eyes. It looks exactly the same, she whispered. Some things don't change, but others do. I am not the same person who sold this house, I reminded her gently. We walked through the cabin, which was clean and preserved exactly as Theodore had left it. Stella ran her hand over the stone fireplace he had built. Mom, I want to apologize specifically for this house, she said, her voice catching. Not just for selling it, but for reducing all our family memories, the birthdays, the Christmases, the summers, to a mere commercial transaction. It's forgiven. Honey, I turned 40 years of shared history into money for a worthless man. Do you know what hurts the most? When I sold it, I felt nothing. Now being here, I can feel Dad in every corner. I can hear his laughter. He is here, Stella. He has always been here. I know. And I know he's proud of how you handled this. You didn't just protect his legacy. You restored mine. We spent the day cleaning and cooking, a quiet, powerful ritual of reconnection. As the sun began to set over the lake, we sat on the porch Theodore had built. Mom, I have a proposal, Stella said, turning to me. I want us to turn this lake cabin into a temporary shelter for women who are leaving situations of financial abuse. A place where they can stay while they get legal help and rebuild their lives. It was the perfect idea, the culmination of her journey. Theodore would have loved the idea that his retreat would serve to help other vulnerable families. I think that's a beautiful idea, darling. We can use the Harding Legacy Foundation resources to maintain it, and you can oversee the program through your studies. Are you sure you want to turn our family sanctuary into that? The best sanctuaries are the ones that are shared, Stella. Theodore always said that a house isn't truly a home until it opens its doors to other people who need love. We drove home that night with a new project and a completely renewed relationship. We were no longer mother and daughter bound by obligation. We were two women building a future based on love, respect, and a common purpose. That night, before falling asleep, I spoke to Theodore in silence. We did it, my love. Our daughter finally understood what truly matters. I felt with absolute certainty his quiet answer. I always knew you would be. You're both stronger than you think. Justice had arrived not as revenge, but as education. Not as punishment, but as transformation. And in the end, we had both gained something immeasurably more valuable than money. Life moved forward with a quiet certainty that was profoundly comforting. The months that followed Stella's transformation were marked by dedication and humility. She was absorbed in her studies and her outreach work, applying the lessons of her rock bottom with fierce intensity. I, Beatrice Harding, found a renewed sense of purpose managing the Beatrice Trust and channeling its resources through the Harding Legacy Foundation. Theodore's secret fortune was finally serving the purpose he had intended: protection and constructive impact. One damp November afternoon, as Stella was tutoring a young client in the living room, Gloria arrived for tea, her expression a mix of awe and concern. "Beatrice, the rumors are solidifying now," Gloria whispered, watching Stella through the archway. "Everyone knows you got the lake cabin back. They know Stella's massive debts vanished overnight. The question isn't are they rich anymore. It's why the charade. And what are they concluding?" I asked, stirring my tea. "They think you were protecting Stella from Marco, and you only showed your hand when she was completely desperate." Gloria leaned closer. "But the part they can't figure out is why she still works at the outreach center and still drives that little teal car. They expect the grand return, the luxury apartment, the arrogance. They don't understand the difference between being rich and acting rich," I pointed out. "Exactly. And that's what's so powerful. You've stripped away the performance. You didn't just save her money, Beatrice. You saved her soul." I smiled, a genuine warm smile. Theodore always knew how to solve a problem with complexity. He did. "But tell me, how do you handle the guilt now? The mother in me still marvels that you let her endure that custodial job." "It was the hardest thing I've ever done," I confessed, the memory still stinging. "Every night she came home exhausted. Every morning she woke up worried. I wanted to stop it. But I also knew that if I rescued her too soon, she would forever believe she was above the hard realities of life. She needed to feel the consequence in her muscles and her spirit. She needed to earn her redemption. And she did," Gloria concluded, nodding toward Stella. "She's helping others now using her own savings. That's true repentance." That night, Stella and I were folding laundry together, a domestic, quiet moment that had become infinitely precious. "Mom," she said, holding up one of Theodore's old gardening shirts, "I had a moment at work today that made me think of you." "Oh?" "One of the women in our support group, Elena, she's finally divorcing her husband who bankrupted her. She has nothing, absolutely nothing, but she landed a job cleaning houses to support her 2 children. She was ashamed. I told her about my custodial job. And what did she say? She was stunned. She said, 'Your mother, the owner of all those buildings, let you clean toilets for 6 months?'" Stella chuckled softly, without bitterness. I told her, "Yes, and it was the best thing she ever did for me. I explained that dignity isn't in the title of your job. It's in the effort you put into it." That's a profound realization, Stella. It changed Elena. She realized she wasn't a victim. She was a worker fighting for her children. I realized that my humiliation gave me a currency I never had before: empathy and authority to help people who truly suffer. "So, your mistake became your mission," I summarized. "Precisely. And that's the greatest wealth Theodore left us, not the assets, but the ability to use them wisely and compassionately." We talked late into the night, discussing the Foundation's next big project: converting one of Theodore's smaller commercial properties, a vacant warehouse downtown, into a transitional skills center for the women we served. It needs to be a place where they can get job training, legal aid and childcare simultaneously, Stella outlined, mapping out the space on a napkin. "We can use the rent income from the loft building to finance the renovations." The loft building. Stella's former luxury home was now funding her mission. The symbolism was exquisite. "I agree," I said. "We'll call Mr. Davies tomorrow and start the legal transfer. I want you to be the executive director of that project, Stella. You have the vision, and more importantly, you have the experience." Stella looked up, tears blurring her vision, but they were tears of pride. "Thank you, Mom. I won't let you down." You already haven't, my love. You've exceeded every expectation Theodore and I ever had. A few weeks later, Mr. Davies and I were reviewing the deeds for the warehouse transfer. Mrs. Harding, Mr. Davies said, tapping a pencil against the ledger. I must admit, observing Miss Stella's transformation has been remarkable. She is thriving. Did you ever truly worry that the shock of the eviction would break her permanently? Of course I worried, I confessed. Every day. But I knew two things. First, that Theodore's plan was built on the premise that true character is revealed under pressure. And second, that my love for her, though hidden, was the safety net she was secretly relying on. I only took away her financial comfort. I never took away her home or her mother. A calculated risk of the highest order. It was an act of love, Mr. Davies. A tough, uncompromising love, but love nonetheless. I didn't want to raise a spoiled heiress. I wanted to raise a responsible, empathetic woman. That weekend, as Stella was visiting the now empty loft building to coordinate a final clean-out before the new management took over, she called me, her voice trembling slightly. Mom, I found something. Something I missed. What is it, honey? It was taped under the desk drawer in the master bedroom. It's a small note, written by Marco, dated just before he left. It says, the money is split 70-30. The old lady is too dumb and grieving to question the quick sale. Just leave her the small share, she won't notice. A cold wave washed over me. The sheer arrogance, the contempt, the certainty of my helplessness. And how does reading that make you feel now, Stella? I asked quietly. It makes me feel pity, Mom, she said, her voice stabilizing. Pity for his small, grasping soul. He thought that 70% of a lie was more valuable than a lifetime of truth. He believed money was power. He was completely wrong. He was the truly poor one. He was, honey. And now you know the difference. I do. And I know that everything he took from us, the cabin, the car, the money, has been returned to us tenfold. Not in cash, but in purpose and clarity. I smiled, looking at the sun setting over the green mountains. Theodore, in his wisdom, had engineered the perfect ending, turning betrayal into the ultimate foundation for our future. The following year passed quickly, marked by the steady growth of both the Harding Legacy Foundation and Stella's own intellectual pursuits. She was deep into her master's program, her focus now sharp and unyielding, fueled by a desire to use her experience for good. I, Beatrice, found joy in managing Theodore's assets, transforming cold numbers into tangible acts of aid. The Foundation's Transitional Skills Center, the renovated downtown warehouse, opened its doors, offering legal consultation, resume building, and therapeutic childcare for women rebuilding their lives after abuse and financial ruin. Stella, now the project's executive director, didn't draw a salary from the foundation for the first year. I need to prove the model works before I take a dime, Mom, she insisted, taking only a meager stipend from her part-time outreach job to cover her personal expenses. She was determined to succeed on merit, not on inheritance. My friend Gloria remained our watchful, loving neighbor. She saw the change in Stella from a distance, often remarking on her newfound humility. Beatrice, Gloria said one afternoon while helping me harvest tomatoes from Theodore's garden. I saw Stella at the supermarket yesterday. She wasn't just buying groceries for herself. She was filling 2 carts, one with bulk goods, clearly for the Foundation's women. She uses her own small earnings to purchase necessities for the transitional housing, I confirmed. She says it reminds her of her own fragile start. That is extraordinary, Gloria mused. But what I really noticed was her face. She has a peace now, Beatrice. A serenity that money can't buy. She's found her true purpose. She has. And it came at the highest price, losing everything she thought mattered. The most profound change, however, was our relationship. We were now equals, discussing foundation strategy, property management. I even delegated some complex asset review tasks from the Beatrice Trust to her, trusting her sharp, newly honed judgment completely. She gave me input not as a dependent child, but as a respected advisor. One warm June evening, while reviewing blueprints for the next foundation project, converting a small, recovered commercial building into permanent, low-cost housing, Stella brought up the elephant in the room. Marco. Mr. Davies says Marco's deportation from Costa Rica is imminent, she mentioned casually, tracing a line on the blueprint. He'll be back in the States within the month, likely penniless and looking for someone to blame. I tensed, a protective, familiar coldness creeping into my voice. Will he try to contact you? Probably. He'll want money, or at least a place to stay. He believes he's owed something. Stella sighed, but her shoulders remained relaxed. Honestly, Mom, I don't care. That man has no conversation with the woman I am today. He is an irrelevant ghost from a past life. No fear, no resentment, only pity. He's still trapped in the delusion that cheating and shortcuts are the way to win. He gave me the gift of clarity without even knowing it. He was the catalyst that pushed me into my own strength. I looked at her, recognizing the powerful, centered woman Theodore had always believed she could become. She had internalized the most difficult lesson of all. Betrayal can be a form of brutal liberation. A week later, we decided it was time to move forward with a plan for the anchor, the lake cabin I had recovered. It had stood empty for over a year, preserved as a symbol of both betrayal and recovery. We need to start the conversion process, Stella announced, her voice full of excitement. Let's turn it into the Theodore Resilience Retreat, a space for the women to go for a week of rest, counseling, and spiritual renewal before they transition back to independent living. I think that's a beautiful way to honor your father's memory, I agreed. A sanctuary of healing built on a foundation of betrayal. I want to go up there this weekend, Mom, to measure the rooms and finalize the floor plan. It needs to feel like home, not a shelter. We drove up that Saturday in the little teal hatchback. The sight of the cabin, nestled peacefully by the lake, brought a complex wave of emotion. Stella stepped out of the car, breathing deeply of the pine-scented air. It smells like Dad. It does. We went inside. The rooms were filled with the quiet ghost of our past life. Stella walked through the kitchen, where she once celebrated birthdays. She paused in the living room, running her hand along the stone fireplace Theodore had built. Mom, I need to apologize again, she said, without preamble. For what, honey? Not for the selling of the house. We're past that. But for the disrespect I showed this place, and by extension, our history. When I sold it, I saw only money. I reduced the 40 years of family love, effort, and sacrifice Theodore poured into this place to a number on a balance sheet. That was the ultimate failure of character. That is forgiven, Stella. The important thing is that you see the depth of that error now. I do. And I know the only way to truly redeem it is to make this place mean more than it ever did before. We spent the day measuring, drafting, and planning. As the sun began to dip, painting the lake in shades of gold and rose, we sat on the porch swing. Do you know what I truly appreciate about this whole ordeal, Mom? Stella asked quietly. What, dear? That you gave me back the cabin, but you didn't make it easy. You didn't just hand me the keys. You made me earn the right to even suggest what to do with it. You made me bring my dignity and my purpose to the table first. You taught me that ownership isn't about the deed. It's about the stewardship. Your father would have said the same thing. I know. And I know he's proud of the woman who gets to be the steward of this place now. Not the girl who sold it. We returned home that night, exhausted but deeply satisfied. The cabin was no longer a symbol of loss. It was a beacon of healing, a shared project that bound us together, not just as mother and daughter, but as partners in legacy. I sat alone later, looking out the window at the familiar geraniums. My final act of tough love had yielded an immeasurable reward. A daughter who was not just prosperous, but wise, purposeful, and unequivocally loyal. The end of my story was now the triumphant beginning of hers. The transition of the lake cabin, the anchor, into the Theodore Resilience Retreat became Stella's passion project. She coordinated with architects, interior designers, and counselors, ensuring every detail fostered peace and dignity. I provided the financial oversight, marveling at her meticulous budgeting, a far cry from the reckless spending that had defined her past. Her transformation was complete. She had become the steward of her inheritance, not its consumer. However, the peace was, of course, temporary. The ghosts of the past rarely stay buried, and in August, Stella received a letter with an unfamiliar smudged postmark. She brought it to me in the kitchen. "It's from Marco," she said, her voice flat, devoid of emotion. "He's back in the States, deported and, according to Mr. Davies, essentially homeless." I felt the familiar protective stiffness return. "Did you open it?" "Yes. He's writing from a halfway house in New Jersey. It's the standard plea. He regrets everything. He was confused by debt. And he needs my forgiveness, and naturally, some financial help to get back on his feet." He also mentions that he saw the news about the Harding Legacy Foundation and knows I'm involved with a lot of money now. "He is testing the waters," I stated, my jaw tight. He assumes the old vulnerable Stella is still available to be manipulated. Stella tossed the letter onto the table, barely glancing at it. "I don't care about the money, Mom. What bothers me is the audacity. He truly believes he has the right to re-enter my life just because his current one failed. He still views me as a resource, not a person. Are you going to respond?" No, responding would give him power. But it did clarify one thing for me. "What is that, dear?" "My forgiveness is irrelevant to his journey. He doesn't need my compassion. He needs to face the consequences that you let me face. And I know now that true forgiveness is simply emotional detachment. He is irrelevant." I was profoundly proud. The old Stella would have been paralyzed by the drama, perhaps tempted by the thought of vindictive revenge, or conversely, foolishly forgiving. This Stella was calm, centered, and impenetrable. Theodore's wisdom, once again, proved prophetic. He had prepared me not just for his absence, but for my daughter's strength. Meanwhile, the local community, which had watched Stella's dramatic fall and humble re-emergence, was starting to piece together the truth about my involvement. Gloria often brought me fragmented reports. "Beatrice, the ladies at the quilting circle are talking about the downtown loft building," Gloria reported one day. "They heard the new management is incredibly fair and that the rents haven't been raised drastically, even though the neighborhood is booming. And they heard the owner is the Beatrice Trust, which is, well, you. Theodore believed in fair commerce, Gloria. Yes, but they think you are operating some kind of social justice scheme, letting Stella run it all. Why keep the secret if everyone knows you're rich? Because the wealth is not the story, Gloria. The lesson is the story. And Stella is still teaching that lesson every day. She is running a multi-million-dollar portfolio through the foundation, yet she still takes the city bus to work, still drives the teal hatchback, and still manages her budget with the care of someone who remembers being broke. The quiet choice Stella made to live simply, despite her inheritance, was the final, most powerful component of her redemption. She didn't need to flaunt her wealth. Her dignity was her display. One evening, Stella returned from a late shift at the transitional center, visibly emotional. "Mom, I have incredible news. Elena, the woman who was afraid to clean houses, she's been hired full-time by a major cleaning service. And she has enough savings now to put down a deposit on an apartment. That's wonderful, Stella. You must be so proud. I am." But when she thanked me, she didn't thank the foundation. She thanked me, the woman who understood what it felt like to be ashamed of a custodial job. She said, "You showed me that even with dirt under my fingernails, I had more value than my husband ever allowed me to believe." Stella sat down, exhausted but beaming. "That's what it's all about, Mom, not the money. It's about restoring a woman's sense of value." "Theodore would be smiling, my dear." "I know. And I have another project, Mom. I want to buy back the tiny coffee shop where you were sitting when I made that horrible phone call." I looked up, surprised. "The one with the cinnamon spice coffee?" "Yes, the owner is retiring. I want to turn it into a non-profit coffee training academy for the women leaving the resilience retreat. They can gain job skills, confidence, and a fair wage before re-entering the workforce. And I want to name it the Beatrice Anchor." Tears sprang to my eyes. The casual cruelty of that betrayal was now being transformed into a tangible symbol of hope and self-reliance, named after the woman who had been dismissed. It was the ultimate loving reversal of her mistake. "That is the most beautiful idea, Stella. We will transfer the funds tomorrow, and I want you to be the sole owner, operating outside of the foundation. Your own enterprise." "Thank you, Mom. This is better than any luxury loft." I watched her walk toward the cabinet to pull out her study materials. My fierce, humble daughter, charting a new course with her own moral compass. The money was merely the fuel. The wisdom was the destination. The final year witnessed the complete fruition of Theodore's secret plan. The Theodore Resilience Retreat at the lake cabin began welcoming its first clients, women finding peace and legal refuge in a place once almost lost to greed. Stella's training academy, the Beatrice Anchor, opened its doors downtown, transforming its bitter origin into a source of hope and employment skills. It was a tangible, daily reminder of the transformative power of humility. One quiet January afternoon, as snow fell outside my window, I watched Stella overseeing her budget at the kitchen table. She was balancing the foundation's annual report, focused and serene. She still wore her practical clothes, still drove the small teal car, and still contributed to the household expenses, never allowing the wealth to define her. Gloria arrived for her weekly tea ritual, stomping the snow from her boots. "Beatrice." "You've won," Gloria stated, shaking her head as she watched Stella. "Completely. She's not just back. She's better. She's found herself." "Theodore gave her the opportunity to find herself, Gloria. That's the true legacy." "But I still have one question," Gloria leaned in. "Do you think Stella truly forgave you for the deception? For letting her suffer?" "I think she did," I replied, looking toward my daughter. "But the forgiveness wasn't necessary for me. It was necessary for her. She had to understand that my actions, though painful, were rooted in deep love, while Marco's, though seemingly loving, were rooted in cold self-interest. She realized true love is about development, not comfort." That evening, Stella and I were discussing the foundation's expansion plans, using another recovered Theodore property, a small vineyard, to fund therapeutic counseling services. "Mom, something arrived for me at the training academy," Stella mentioned, her voice neutral. "Another letter. From Marco." I felt the familiar tension. "Still asking for money?" "No. He's out of the halfway house and working as a dishwasher in Newark. He wrote a short letter admitting his mistakes, not asking for money, but just stating that he finally understood why I didn't respond to his earlier pleas." "And what did he say?" "He said that he saw a news clip about the Beatrice Anchor coffee shop, and that he finally understood. I had built a life that had no place for him. That I was finally stronger than he was. And how do you feel?" "Complete detachment," Stella confirmed. "He's not angry. He's not pathetic. He's simply gone from my emotional landscape. That's the deepest kind of freedom." The next day was Sunday. We drove out to the lake cabin. It was fully converted, warm, and inviting, a true sanctuary. As we walked through the living room, Stella paused by the stone fireplace. "Mom," she said, her eyes tracing the carved initials Theodore had placed there decades ago. "I want to say this one last time. Thank you for the pain." "That sounds contradictory, my dear." "It is, but it's true. If you had rescued me immediately, I would have used Theodore's wealth to hire a powerful divorce lawyer, sued Marco for everything, and felt self-righteous. I would have felt entitled to the money. But I never would have learned the courage to walk into an office cleaning job at night. And that courage is what matters. It's everything. That courage is what gave me the authority to run the foundation. I learned that my self-worth is inherent, not something Marco could steal or you could grant. You didn't save me from the fire, Mom. You taught me how to walk through it. I reached out and held her hand, feeling the quiet, fierce strength in her grasp. The old resentment, the lingering questions, they were gone, replaced by a deep, mature respect. Your father and I always knew you had that strength, Stella. We just had to wait for you to find it. She smiled, a peaceful, complete smile. Well, I finally did, and I couldn't have done it without the ultimate act of tough love. We sat there until dusk, watching the snow fall softly over the frozen lake. Justice, I realized, hadn't been about reclaiming the properties or punishing Marco. Justice was the transformation of my daughter from a grasping, spoiled child into a compassionate, self-sufficient woman. And in that transformation, I, Beatrice Harding, had found my own hard-won peace and the final, comforting answer to my grief. Theodore's legacy was secure, not in his investments, but in the woman our daughter had finally become.